Another unfortunate in the leadership and envy scenario is that often with envy, we will do one of two things: disparage or distance. These two behaviors will often create more issues. With disparagement, we tend to put down the person we envy or dismiss the value of what the person has that we would desire. In essence, we make ourselves better by dismissing the other. And with distance, we tend to pull away from those we envy, keep our distance, and are non-engaging with those we feel we cannot compete with. This form of distancing will sometimes temporarily relieve the feelings of envy. However, it does not fully address the issue. The problem with envy in leadership is that some suppose that leadership almost has an envious component to it, to begin with, that leaders often have the desire to achieve, and indeed almost necessary for leaders to desire to lead others. This is echoed by Kim, O'Neill, and Cho, who advocate the potentiality for leaders to find burnout, making them a bit susceptible to the emotional side of themselves. Also to be considered is the idea that leaders may create unnecessary negative emotions in their interactions with followers. Whether this is intentional or accidental, this is due to the reality that leaders treat their followers differently, and the perception of followers considering how they are treated, be it well, reasonably, or poorly. Kim, O'Neill, and Cho take these ideas further with the assertion that leaders may create envy amongst followers, creating what these researchers call harmful effects, and that our followers are very aware that leaders determine pay increases, job assignments, and promotion opportunities. Thus, this reality informs leaders not only of the personal responsibility of dealing with envy, but also the grand responsibility for us to not let it fester amongst our followers and to actively seek to distill this sin wherever it may exist. So now we're going to talk about how to combat envy. And the obvious question becomes, how do we deal with envy in our lives and specifically in our leadership? According to Stein, leaders can moderate envy in 3 ways. First, the leader must temper their feelings of envy by a capacity to identify with those others. This, according to Stein, enables the leader to feel satisfaction from the achievement of others. Secondly, to moderate envy in leadership is the idea of being aware of our feelings that are envious. This awareness helps to militate against the operation of those feelings in an unconscious and rather subversive way. And finally, leaders must act with intentionality and not act upon the feelings of envy. Though the desire may be there, leaders must learn not to be driven and not to act it out. Tomlin provides 3 insightful solutions to combating envy. First, he advocates that we change the price tags, meaning to question the values that says we should envy instead of focus on the ability to love, to build friendships, and to be content. This will guide one to the value of things. It's much deeper than envy, a grasping of the things that will loosen our grip from being envious. Secondly, he advocates the value of gifts, meaning to admire without comparing. Envy is a mixture of admiration and distaste, wonder and revulsion, love and hate. The key is this: to admire the person and their qualities without moving into an envious relationship. In other words, to value their giftings. Third and finally, the advocation that we connect with God, meaning to realize there is more to this world than the temporary that we see before us. Ultimately, this will provide a deep sense of contentment like nothing else can. This level of contentment comes when we realize that there is nothing we can do to make God love us more than He already does, and that if we have God as the number one, we will not be able but to have a deep love for those around us, leaving no room for envy. Menon and Thompson offer that this can be a bit complex to do because envy can be difficult to manage. For first, we have to admit that we harbor such a socially unacceptable emotion, and that the tendency is to deny or conceal how we feel envious, therefore making things worse due to the repression of envy, which will resurface and be much stronger. Thus, we must be very purposeful in our deliberate attempt to manage any envy, covetousness, or jealousy that they may attempt to exist within us. Indeed, one might say that this is a battle. These researchers offer some advice in combating envy and embracing the generosity of spirit, beginning with the idea of being able to pinpoint what makes us feel envious, to recognize the circumstances and qualities in others that trigger us to envy. Next, we should not focus on other people, but rather on ourselves. We should absolutely not compare ourselves to others. Mostly, this leads to being ungenerous to ourselves. And finally, we must learn to affirm ourselves, learn to see what we are, and appreciate ourselves. Kind of sounds a bit like humility. Almost seems natural to suppose that the very antidote for envy, or any of the deadly sins, would indeed be the moral and virtuous life. In one way of looking at it, we have the remedy all along, if only we will follow through on the journey. In conclusion, leadership envy may exist from the leader towards the follower, from the follower towards the leader, from peer to peer, be it follower or leader. And as you might see, it can and does exist about anywhere. But yet it need not be so. We can see that envy and leadership are not necessary partners. In fact, they are destructive partners, taking us much of nowhere except down a path of nothingness, emptiness, and non-fulfillment. And with clear direction, most of us will not desire or e'er go down such a path. The totality is this: proceed with caution, keep the essence of envy in check, do not let things fester within us, and be incredibly deliberate about our leadership journey. The journey need not be fraught with envy, or for that matter, any other deadly sin. Instead, we have hope. We can decide what we let take up residence within us. We can choose the virtues rather than the vices. We can choose the good in life, the virtuous approach. If one does take the time to consider such things, in light of the life and the leadership journey, I remain convinced that we would not sign up for a life of pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust, but rather we would choose the journey of humility, kindness, patience, diligence, charity, temperance, and chastity. While there is a deep acknowledgement that we are all indeed bound by our own humanity, the test of this journey comes in our day-to-day living of life and ultimately in our leadership journey, and the choice is yours.